G'day listeners and welcome to yet another episode of The Next Big Thing. As you know, I'm terribly passionate about music, and today's guest is a virtuoso guitarist, a composer, producer, and author of the FuzAsian process, and even has recently released an album by the same name, FuzAsian, which I have checked out, and it is absolutely electrifying. So, without further ado, please welcome our guest for today, Steven Chelliah. Steven, how are you, mate?
Good, doing good. How you doing, Shriram? Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, very well.
And we're in different corners of the world. So
That's it. I should have said joining us from Manhattan, from New York. Yes, no, that's great. And thank you for making the timings work. We really appreciate your effort to make this happen.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Good. So I must say, I crossed paths with you when we both received a very common, acknowledgement from the Recording Academy when we were both accepted into the class of 2023 as voting members. So congratulations to you, and it's
Thank
a privilege.
You. Congratulations to you as well. That's a big achievement. Yeah.
No, thank you, Stephen. And going by the pedigree of musicians like yourself, I really feel honored to be, in the same class. So it is very thrilling to actually speak to it. Excellent. Good. Okay. So, let's start with that, right? Where did that come from? Wanting to be a voting member of the Grammys. There are some Grammy, aspirations, I'm sure. So talk to us about that.
I guess, my first exposure to the Grammys was as a child. I used to watch the Grammys every year, since I think 1992. And that was kind of like, when Michael Jackson ruled the world,
Of course.
So we were big Michael Jackson fans who watched the Grammys every year.
Same here.
And that was where it started, and then I think fast forward so I was about 5-6 years old. I started watching the Grammys every year, and fast forward to when I was like 13 or 14, I wanted to be a professional musician, and I found out I'm a big fan of Quincy Jones, a student of his work. As a big band arranger, I'm trained in writing big band music. I majored in jazz comp at Berklee. So when I found out Quincy went to Berklee and, he was a legend and all of that, that's kind of what sparked my aspirations to want to go to Berklee and then get involved with the Recording Academy. It was kind of early on.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk about Berklee. We're going to talk more about the Recording Academy. But I realized that I missed a very crucial traditional first step of the next big thing, which helps us get to know Steven Chelliah better. So, Steven, as mentioned to you before, share with us two seemingly factual things about yourself. And then I put myself on the spot and I have to guess which one's fact and which one's fit, because one of them is fictional. One of them is factual.
So to share two things, one is fact, one is fake, one is fiction.
That's it. There's one is fact, one is fiction. I have the wonderful job of figuring out which is which, and then we will explore your wonderful journey further.
Okay, what's fact and fiction? Fact is I doing music because I want to become famous. Okay. And then the other thing I would share is I believe in evolving music.
Both musical, huh? You believe in evolving music. Look, I think given my brief interaction with you, I think it's safe to say that second one is fact, and first one is fame for a couple of reasons, because I only think you're famous, and so and I think your philosophy of music is defined by the second one. Would that be right?
Correct.
Absolutely. Okay. Good.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
So what got you into music?
They should have made it harder. Damn.
You should have made it harder. Yeah. Generally, I'm put on the spot with some weird stuff. I tell you.
I could have prepped a better one if I had.
That's okay. Well, it comes back to the amount of notice I gave you.
That's cool. We're improvising. Yeah. Maybe you can ask me that later again if you want.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a take two. No, not a problem. So, what got you into music, Steven? What was your first sort of interaction, first memory of music?
Sure. Yeah, I love that question. To just the core, I was 7 years old, and in my dad's car, I still remember. He had a Nissan Bluebird, an '80s Nissan old car, and he had the best of Bee Gees a compilation cassette. It was that one that was in the mid 90s. It was a yellow cassette cover, and it was of the silhouette of the four brothers, three brothers when they were kids. And the first track on that album, that side A was Holiday, and then track 2 was Speaks and Specs, and then track 3 was I Just Gotta Get a Message to You. I fell in love with that song, and that song kind of gave me this sense of nostalgia, or like just being on like a dreamy vehicle. Music was like that. It kind of evoked a lot of feelings of magic, purpose, direction. That was where it started. The Bee Gees remain then until today my favorite super group and songwriter.
Absolutely, and with good reason. And I think you used a couple of words that really describe the Bee Gees well. Dreamy and magic. I think they really bring that, especially with their vocal harmonies and arrangements and things. It's just,
exactly. One of the things they do to keep that organic thing is whenever they track harmonies, they refuse to overdub it separately. Even though the parts are very written, they will all sing into one mic. And they would do multiple takes until they get the performance perfect.
Oh, so the tracks are never treated separately. That is one track.
Well, when you listen to like songs like when they're tracking the harmonies, like Too Much Heaven and stuff, and they're singing Nobody Get Too Much Heaven No More. All the harmonies are together on one mic.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It sounds like that.
Yeah,
because over the years of being like really like loving their work and all of that, I've watched multiple interviews and how producers would talk about what it was like being in the room with them and what they would do.
Yes. So I mean, Bee Gees are a fantastic inspiration and role model to have for any musician. And I believe Paul McCartney's played a big role in your life. And you've said that Michael Jackson and I must say, one of your cover photos of you with the guitar and the hair and all of that, it was very, very reminiscent of MJ. I don't know why. It's deliberate.
Thank you.
But I got that vibe. I got that strong MJ vibe. So, so there are all of these influences. But on the other hand, I believe there, points to your roots is the South Indian Carnatic classical influence as well. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider myself a practitioner of Indian classical music, but I took lessons in learning the 72 Malakarta Raga systems. I was very curious when I was about 15 about the different scales that, like I was a student of jazz and playing at that point, just shredding a lot of rock and all of that. I was into like Yngwie Malmsteen and Ritchie Blackmore and all of those guitar players, Eric Johnson. But then I was like wanting to go into jazz, and there are all the scales associated with jazz, like melodic minor and all the different dominant chord scales. And I was like, hey, my uncle was a well-known musician in Malaysia, Steven Chelliah. He's passed on now, but he was my music mentor, and he told me that, Indian classical music has a lot of other scales, that are not explored in Western music yet, and you should toy around with them. So, I went out and bought whatever books I could find that had Indian scales, rags, notated in Western notation, and that got me going for a bit. I learned 3 or 4 scales. Then I wanted to know more. I found out that there were dozens of them. So I took lessons with this Veena player in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and he showed me the Malakarta Raga system. And I wrote it all down, came back, notated them. And then I started exploring with them, and I found out that, hey, there's potential for some of these scales that have a lot of potential for, first, at that point, it was me just getting chord progressions out of them. So using, stacking them up in thirds and fourths and documenting whatever chords you get from it and then composing with it. It was more compositional up until the point I went to Berklee. And then after Berklee, when I came to New York, it was more about improvisation and how can I make this an improvisational tool, So the essence of soloing in jazz is about going outside the chord. You can play in the chord. For instance, in C major, you just play in C major, correct?
Sure.
But if you want to go outside that and sound outside the chord, but still related musical, you can to have it be outside but still musical, like that chromatic sound comes from using in jazz like different symmetrical like scales, like the symmetrical half whole, or using a melodic minor on an altered scale or something. My goal was to find how I can use ragas for expanding jazz chromaticism and like the mode of the moment, like when you're playing it. And so that led me on that, and took years and I think
so
whatever I found and incorporated as my concepts in my book, and this is the prototype of the next book that's coming out. And this was the first book that was released. It's on this small jazz publishing label here in Harlem, in Manhattan.
What's the second one called? What's the second one called?
The second one, I'm going to call it FuzAsian. It's going to have a different heading to it.
Right.
Right now, the working title is Eastern Chromatic Tools for the Modern Improviser, but that could be, tweaked up a little bit. But that's coming together.
Have you trademarked the term FuzAsian yet?
I have trademarked it. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So so that's my thing. I know the ragas, and in terms of hearing it, like like one of my favorite Carnatic singers or Indian classical singers is Shankar Mahadevan.
Oh, that is very interesting. You say that because I've had I've done a lot with him.
Okay. Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yes.
And it just gives me the chills when he sings like that.
So he's one of a kind. There's actually it's matchless actually in a sense.
Right. And so like for me, like that's something like, oh wow, I don't do that, but I take Indian scales and I play with them, I mess with them, and I use modern theoretical concepts and concepts that are in FuzAsian, like how to just play jazz and play modern music using these vehicles because they're very unique scales, Yeah. There's one, like rag. I'm not plugged in here, but I just play a little bit for you.
Yeah, girl, let's go for it. Let's hear something.
I wish I plugged my amp in. I didn't know that. Like, but for instance, like this, I don't know if you can hear, but like, can you hear that?
Vaguely.
I could get an acoustic guitar.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Well, there are certain scales that I don't want to make this too long, but there are scales that are very interesting and can be used as vehicles for just an acoustic, so I'm not going to shred on it or anything.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
You can hear some of this. So, like, for instance, like this rag, right? Right? That gives all these chords, like C minor 6, D minor 7 flat 5, E major 7 flat 5, F minor 7, G sus2, A flat major 7, right? And then it gives you A minor 7, or A minor 7 flat 5, or A minor 11, all of those voice syncs, and then back to C minor 6. So, like that song in my album, Double Flat 7, the instrumental is using that raga, and then after that I start soloing inside and outside of it using other raga superimpositions to kind of just be jazz. You playing jazz chromatically from an Indian perspective,
Fantastic. That's so fascinating. So I'm a big believer of, again, I'm a very instinctive, intuitive musician. I've learned whatever I've learned, but I generally like to start with a what if. What if we blend this? What if we mix that? What does that sound like? And eventually the litmus test for me is, is it pleasant to my ears? Do my ears like it? So I like to bend rules, sometimes break them as well. But as they say, you got to know the rules first. So
yes.
So I love that. I love that sense of experimentation and exploration and saying, okay, where does this journey take me? So I love that philosophy. And, I want to talk about FuzAsian, the album itself and your, the whole authorship of that process. We will get there in a minute. But tell me about the Berklee experience. What was that like? What are a couple of, key wins from your Berklee experience that kind of stay with you for life?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was one of the best experiences of my life, I think. It was everything I wanted it to be.
Right. Okay.
I think that there's a great tradition of, jazz is the classical music of America, which is the classical music of now, right? And all of that, the study of that music on a conservatory level started in Boston in the 40s and the early 50s. So that place has a very special, some people say it's kind of like the words are coming to me, what was the capital of classic? The Vienna of jazz,
Right. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Schools like New England Conservatory and Berklee, and there was a music theorist and a mathematician called Joseph Schillinger, and I'm a disciple of his work. I have his books.
Right.
It's a system of music, composition theory. He has book 1, book 2, and he's super advanced cat. But he had a school here in New York, and then he moved to Boston. He called it the Shriram House, and that was a place that had workshops for jazz musicians, the African American musicians who were here in the like early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, came there and like did workshops and spoke about jazz in a conservatory setting. There wasn't a place for that before. This was all classical music, So that was the first place, and then that became Berklee later on, and that's why Quincy Jones went. He was very fascinated by that place.
Yeah.
So when I went to Berklee, I got to study with that last batch of that jazz composition lineage. People like Ted Pease, Ken Pullick, who authored some of the books, the well-known books and the legendary textbooks of Berklee's jazz curriculum. I got studied with Dick Lowell. He wrote the big band book. Ken Pullick took me under his wings. He was the chair of jazz comp. He stepped down now, but he really believed in my FuzAsian ideas. And he's also the kind of like an executive editor and advisor to me in the first book, and as I was developing FuzAsian, so he gave me a lot of support. Gave me confidence.
Fantastic. And I know that many Grammy Award winners have come out of Berklee, so I hope you join that lineage as well. If that's what, God willing, Yes,
if at the right time and the right moment something hits a chord with people, then why not?
Absolutely. And we talk about chords all the time, but I think music is a lot about hitting the right chord with the listeners, with the people.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then, the rest just happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Indeed. Okay, fantastic. No, great to hear about the Berklee journey. I must say I have semi-considered it at times, but I think that boat might have sailed for me with family and being in Melbourne. But let's see. You never say never. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's great. Great to hear about that journey. Let's talk about FuzAsian. Okay. So before we get into the album, you are the author of the FuzAsian process. So tell us more about the method, FuzAsian Method. So tell us more about the philosophy behind that, and then we'll talk more about the album itself.
Sure. The word FuzAsian kind of explains itself. It's basically the fusing together of Eastern source material into the universal canvas of music, which is called jazz today, but into contemporary music. That's what FuzAsian means. The philosophy of it is I don't think music can be, as in terms of where we're going, can be called Western and Eastern anymore. I think it's becoming one universal music, correct?
Absolutely.
But when we look back at the last great classical movement or stream, it is jazz. And jazz is obviously informed by European classical music. But anyway, where we're at now, and like this next chapter, is we're looking at jazz, and we look to it to study music more. And the philosophy is to just take more material that hasn't been explored, and that can be. It doesn't have to be like in my case. It would be South Indian scalar theory, and bringing it in and finding harmonic relativity to these irregular scales and modes. Because when you study it from a harmonic perspective, you're going to get irregular intervallic patterns, which give different melodic cadences. And then that affects the harmonic implications for what chords you can harmonize it with or get from it. So it's it's just new music, right? And then that's the theory aspect. And then once you know that, hopefully you can forget about that and just compose. And I'll share with you something that's very current to what I am going through right now. Like I spent many years of my life composing, trying to use a certain theoretical concept in FuzAsian. I would be trying to make these theories musical, because I'm using it. I'm like, I want to make, so I write in that way. And I kind of got to the point where I really missed the major scale. I really missed the good old blues scale and a major scale.
Right.
And then I came to this thing. I'm like, look, I want to forget all of the FuzAsian stuff and just compose. And a lot of this album, like the songs, especially where the vocals come in, is me doing that. And I may use a FuzAsian raga. I may write a song that has a nice common progression, which is part of the canvas of music now.
Yes.
It may not be raga based, it may be Ionian based and kind of Western jazz progressions. But then every now and then I will put in something that comes from my book. But that's me hearing it, not like I want to put this in there now, because then it's a Berklee project. It's not. It's not a project of the soul.
Correct. It's not a project of the soul. I really like the way you said that. Yes, yes.
So yeah,
not a project of the soul. Gosh, I'm going to use that.
Right. Yeah. You're kind of trying to turn yourself on, make yourself feel something.
Yeah.
I think if you feel something, another human being always can feel that with you.
Absolutely. Yes. Well said.
I'm trying to do that. When you think about music that way, everybody is equal. There's no competition now. The guy who knows 4 chords is in the same playing field as the guy who knows 4,000 chords.
Yes.
Or knows everything. So that's a very mysterious, humbling thing about it.
Well, that gives me hope.
Oh, come on, you're being too humble.
No, that's good.
All hope.
That's good. Good to hear that. And so I'm curious, is FuzAsian almost a genre in itself? Do you see that going that way, or how do you see it?
I think maybe I think that word genre,
it's a bit limiting, isn't it?
I always think that, I don't know, I'm a bit not so sure about that term, because
I'm not a big fan of it. I must say that I'm not a big fan of that word.
I rather say FuzAsian is a technique. It's a method.
Technique. Okay, method. Technique.
And then you can take that and you can, be a country musician and write a song and put some of that in. And so it's not. It can be used in any genre. I can play like Chicago blues and put some ragas in, and it sounds. Yes. Oh, what was that you played? That sounds nice.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, as I told you, for me, the final benchmark is it pleasant on the ears to the, or is it jarring? Is it distasteful? So much like food, and I have a big passion for food as well.
Oh yeah.
Sure. I'm all about what if these two things go, but end product, if it's nice on the palate, it's good. It works.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so simple, right? If it sounds good, you feel it, then.
Yes, it sounds good. You feel it. Somewhere it touches an emotional sort of chord. Apart from all the technicalities of music, because I personally find that musicians tend to focus more on the technicalities, and so be it. I mean, music has certain technicalities and structure for a reason. But at the end of the day, you got to reach out and touch the heart of the listener. And if you can succeed in doing that, I think you've got something really special.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a lot of what you just spoke on there. Was kind of like what I went through in my like the whole teenagers, in my 20s too. But I think there's reason behind that also. I think, like you said, that can be classified as a period of learning the rules.
Absolutely.
Becoming just being a student, and I still love being a student. I love waking up when I have nothing to do and just learning some Charlie Parker solos or learning some bebop. And of course, I'm not composing there, but it's just the love of still being a student. It doesn't stop.
Absolutely. So I love that attitude, especially in music, because I think and rarely have I met a brilliant musician who doesn't recognize the need to continue learning. So Shankar Mahadevan, who I've had the benefit of knowing personally and working with, he's been a mentor, a guru at different stages of my life. And I once told him this a few years ago, saying, why don't you write a book? And he said, his response was very interesting. And he said, but my journey's just started.
Right.
Yeah. So, and this was well after he was there. So I'm like, wow.
Those wise words right there. Yeah.
The wise words right there. Yeah. So, I mean, I love that attitude. And so thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about FuzAsian, the album itself. You've collaborated with a number of people. Tell us some behind the scenes stuff and how it all came together.
Oh, yeah, cool. Actually, it's funny because the album started out just being an instrumental fusion jazz album. So what we did was, I just called my bass player that I did a few gigs with, Marcelo. He went to Berklee too. And I called another guy, James Knorrell. He's from Michigan, and he went to Berklee too. Great prog drummer, He plays more prog and progressive music, and he can hang and play jazz too. But my stuff is not so straight ahead. I think there's one track in the album, Jahaji Blues, that is a bebop swing thing. But apart from that, everything is more fusion, jazz, pop, rock kind of, But anyway, I called them. We didn't really rehearse. We just got in the studio. I brought charts. Every day we got in the studio, it was a plan to record one song. So we'll noodle on it a little bit, jam on it a bit, play on it, and then hit record.
Right.
And it was that fast, But I would be very prepared with my notation. I like notating a lot. Right. I like notating my bass parts. And so the music was all recorded as a trio, guitar, bass, drums. Everything else on top of it was vocal overdubs. My vocals were very scored. So we track rhythm section live to click maybe 5-6 times. I might have some backtracks in there so we are hearing everything as we're playing. I would do guitar solos live too, but it would be just placeholders. Once I take the tracks back after that, I edit it on, I use Logic for editing, sometimes Pro Tools. Edit it, clean it up, and then I overdub my guitar solos. I take my time with that.
Right. And are the guitar solos, are they notated as well, or you're sort of going with the feel?
No, that's completely improvised.
Yep. Okay.
But I do try to make sure my solos are not overdubbed solos, like I try to not do Frankensteins, as they say, I try to make it a performance I'm proud of. So I would be sitting on it until I get an idea of like, okay, this is the landscape, and then I sit with that for days, like let the subconscious take it in, and then
yes.
come in one day, and then like in under 10. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 takes, you get something very good. Sometimes you sit for a bit with it. But I want to put things I'm proud of.
Absolutely. I mean, your work is an extension of you, right? So absolutely. So and I love what I've heard so far. It's I use the word electrifying, and I felt that. So I was trying to do some very calm work, especially at the first track, and I just couldn't focus on my work. I'm like, no, I've got to listen to this, and it totally absorbed me. And it was fascinating, and that journey is still going on. So thank you for putting it out there, and I look forward to sharing it with my peers and in my community as well. And hopefully Melbourne loves it enough, and maybe we get you to perform in Melbourne, right? So,
wow, thank you so much.
You performed here before? You performed in Australia before?
I have never, but I've been to Australia about 9 or 10 times.
Right. Okay. All right. So next time you come, you get your guitars, mate. So
exactly, and I got to get that mate thing going on too. I gotta be dropping a couple of
I must apologize
in America,
for that.
we say dude, like yo, dude. It's all about dude, dude fever. But
so I do it subconsciously now, 15 years in, and I'm allowed to do that now, but it is a very Australian thing, isn't it? So
I like Australia. I miss Australia.
No, it's great. It's a great place.
The weather is so good over there.
Weather is good over there, except for Melbourne, though. Melbourne's a shocker in winter.
It's cold?
It is very cold.
Really?
But, I mean, maybe the New Yorkers and the Americans would, look at us and go, what are you talking about? But we have, in terms of temperature, it's about 1 or 0 degrees, okay?
Celsius, correct?
Celsius, not Fahrenheit, correct. Celsius. It doesn't go sub-zero, but it is miserable.
Yeah, it's cold.
It's just so cold. It feels colder. So,
you get a lot of coastal winds. Like, is it breezy? Is it windy?
It is. Yeah, there's a chill factor with the wind, and we complain. In Melbourne, we complain, but everything else about Melbourne, the coffee, the culture, the arts, the vibe. Oh, Melbourne's home. I'm not moving anywhere. But yeah, but good. So that's that. Okay. So look, I'd love chatting to you for a very long time, but we try to sort of limit the time for these podcasts to about the 30-minute mark. So which kind of sadly brings me to the very last question. I have lots more, but maybe I'll take some off air. But for the sake of the podcast, we always end this and we get our guests to, share their inspiring stories, like you have yours. So somewhere somebody, awakens something within them and they say, okay, you know what? I'm also going to chase my dreams and hopefully be the next big thing. That's how the name is about. So to be the next big thing, in your experience, what are some non-negotiables, some must-haves in order for someone to be a big thing?
I think it's firstly the desire to fulfill a need that is already there.
Interesting.
Because if there's no need for something, you got to find that need, and then you got to find how your voice can contribute to that need. Because I think that you can just be in your space and create or make something, but then all of that will lead to the process of like, okay, if I really want to be the next thing, meaning this is the thing that everyone wants or needs right now, because it's all about product and you being a product, and it's consumer based, right? That's you giving to people essentially. So you got to know what they need.
Yeah.
And then your evolution is a process of you finding out, well, first knowing what you can bring to the table. And the evolution of that process is you finding, okay, this is how I would do this, but what is the need here? What can I give?
Yes.
And then that's a process of humility right there, that whole process, because, I think people say you got to write many songs until one song really gets in, right? But that you're also refining that process as you keep writing. You learn something you didn't know about from the previous song. You're like, yeah, let me do it now, this and like that. And I think that's a very natural process, I think. And then you finally learn how to find where you sit in the world and who needs what you're saying and doing your audience. And building your culture is a good word. I'm speaking from an artistic, musical perspective, I guess.
Please.
You can use the truth for that. Like I think it's really culture. Finding an evolution of a musician to being the next thing is building your culture. You got to know what your culture is, and you are in that culture. What you bring. That's what learning the process is, I think.
Fantastic. No, there's so much to take away there. And so what I can hear is, figure out what you bring to the table and trace it back to your culture. Right.
Knowing where you come from. Important. But then when I say culture, I mean like anything. It could not just be your ethnic culture. It could be people who relate to this message you're bringing. What is your message that could be linked with some cultural aspects? Maybe like for me, I'm an immigrant American. Like with Malaysian roots, so I feel a lot of things about the plights of being an immigrant. The process of getting your permanent residence. It's a lot of work.
Yes,
things you got to do. So maybe my culture could be relating to people, writing about songs about the same thing. That's a culture right there. But that's just one aspect of it. That can grow. Just being a storyteller and finding your listeners.
Yes, storyteller and finding. It's all about telling a story and finding someone to listen to that story, isn't it? So, no, wonderful. Thank you for talking about your entire journey for music coming out of a desire to meet the need of the audience. And, I thoroughly enjoyed listening about the Berklee story, about the whole concept of FuzAsian. There's so much more to talk about. And I think we'll have a little offline discussion after this as well. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
Steven Chelliah, remember the name, check out FuzAsian, and, hopefully in a few months, the man's holding a Grammy in his hands. So best wishes. Thank you so much, Steven.
Thank you, Shriram. Thank you for having me.